The billionaire realizes his contract bride is innocent. Their first night changes everything. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main characters. The conference room of Cole Holdings was silent except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. Adrian Cole, 35, the youngest billionaire in the city's financial district, stood by the glass wall overlooking Manhattan. His reflection looked back at him, cold and composed, the kind of man who never made decisions based on emotion. Yet what he was about to do had nothing to do with business and everything to do with control. Across the polished table sat Lena Hart, 26, a temporary assistant with worn-out shoes and a resume full of rejections. She had been called into this meeting without warning. Her palms were damp, and her mind raced. Why would the CEO want to see her? Adrian turned slowly, a single sheet of paper in his hand. "Miss Hart," he said in a tone as even as the hum of the air conditioner. "I have a proposition for you." Lena blinked. "A proposition?" He placed the document in front of her. The paper was thick, expensive, like everything else in this building. Her eyes scanned the first line, and her breath caught. "Marriage contract." "I do not understand," she whispered. Adrian's gaze was unwavering. "My company's board is forcing me to marry before the end of the quarter to maintain my position as CEO. They believe stability in my personal life reflects stability in leadership. I need a wife on paper. You will be compensated, your mother's medical bills cleared, and your debts handled immediately." Lena stared at him, her heart pounding loud enough to drown out reason. "You are serious?" "Completely," he replied. "It is business. A one-year agreement, no real relationship, no obligations beyond public appearances. You will have your freedom back when the contract ends." She pushed the paper away, almost trembling. "Why me? You could have anyone. Why choose your assistant?" For the first time, a flicker of something human passed over his face. "Because you are honest. You do not pretend. That is rare in my world." Lena swallowed hard. Her mother's surgery estimate echoed in her mind, the bills, the eviction notice waiting at home, the empty refrigerator. Pride screamed to walk away, but desperation whispered louder. "If I say yes," she said quietly, "what are the conditions?" Adrian sat down across from her, the scent of his cologne faint but clean. "5 rules," he said. "No real feelings, no shared bedroom. Attend 5 major events as my wife. Keep our agreement confidential. And under no circumstance can either of us back out before the year ends." Lena stared at the inked lines. Every rule felt like a wall closing around her. Still, she picked up the pen. "You are buying my silence and my time," she murmured. "I am buying peace," he corrected. Her signature was small and uncertain beneath his bold one. When the last stroke dried, Adrian reached across the table and extended his hand. "From now on, you are Mrs. Cole, at least in the public eye." Her fingers brushed his for a brief second. His skin was warm, his touch surprisingly gentle. "This is insane," she whispered. Adrian's lips curved faintly, the ghost of a smile. "Insanity built empires, Mrs. Cole. Welcome to mine." Outside, the New York sky darkened, city lights flickering to life. Inside, 2 strangers sat bound not by love but by ink and desperation, unaware that this cold transaction would ignite the very thing both of them feared the most. And so began the marriage that was never meant to be real. The rain came down in thin silver lines against the windows of Lena's small apartment. She sat on the edge of her bed, the contract folded neatly beside her, the ink still fresh. The hum of the city outside felt distant, almost unreal. Just this morning, she had been a temp worker worried about late rent and her mother's hospital bills. Now she was at least by paper the wife of a billionaire. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared. "Driver waiting downstairs. Formal fitting tonight. No greeting, no name, just instructions." Lena exhaled and grabbed her worn coat. The elevator creaked as it descended, and when the doors opened, a black sedan waited at the curb, its headlights cutting through the drizzle. The driver held the door for her, silent. The leather smelled expensive, almost intimidating. The ride to Cole Manor took nearly an hour. Through the tinted window, Manhattan's noise faded into the quiet rhythm of the suburbs. When the gates finally opened, she saw the mansion, white stone, ivy climbing its walls, and lights glowing softly behind tall windows. It looked less like a home and more like a museum. Adrian was already waiting in the marble foyer, dressed in a charcoal suit, phone in hand. He looked up when she entered, eyes calm but assessing. "You are late," he said simply. "The message did not include a time," she replied, meeting his gaze. A small pause, then the corner of his mouth curved almost imperceptibly. "Fair enough. Come. We have much to prepare." The next hours unfolded like a strange dream. A stylist, two assistants, and a photographer moved around her with practiced precision. Dresses of silk and velvet appeared, jewelry boxes opened, cameras flashed. Adrian stood nearby, giving short nods of approval. "Too formal," he said once. "Too bright." Another time. But when she stepped out in a simple navy gown, his voice softened. "That one." Lena caught her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back did not look like her. For the first time, she understood what it meant to be part of his world. Elegant, untouchable, a symbol instead of a person. Dinner followed, served on porcelain so thin it glowed beneath the chandelier. Adrian sat at the other end of the long table, every movement deliberate, precise. For several minutes, only the quiet sound of silver cutlery filled the space. "You do not have to look so nervous," he said finally. "It is just dinner." "You eat like a board meeting," she murmured before she could stop herself. He looked up, surprised, and then unexpectedly laughed. It was not loud but real. "Perhaps I do," he admitted. Old habits die hard. The sound eased something inside her. For a fleeting second, he did not seem like the cold businessman who had bought a year of her life. Later that night, as she was shown to her room separate, just as the contract stated, she paused at the doorway. "Mr. Cole," she said quietly, "thank you for keeping your word." He turned, one hand in his pocket. "Do not thank me yet, Mrs. Cole. This arrangement will test both of us." The door closed softly behind her. Alone in the lavish room, Lena pressed a hand over her chest, feeling the strange rhythm of her heartbeat. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, echoing faintly through the glass. Somewhere down the hall, Adrian stood at his window, watching the storm with the same expression she wore, composed but uncertain. Neither of them knew it then, but that night marked the first crack in the walls they had built, and in that silence, something unspoken began to shift. The following morning, sunlight spilled through the tall windows of Cole Manor, lighting up the gold frames and marble floors. Lena woke early, still unused to the softness of the sheets or the silence that filled the enormous house. No street sounds, no neighbors arguing, just the distant hum of luxury. For a moment she forgot where she was until the sight of the elegant gown hanging by the door reminded her. She dressed simply, pulling her hair into a low bun before stepping out into the hallway. The mansion felt more like an exhibit than a home. Every surface gleamed, every painting perfectly centered. The staff moved quietly, polite but distant. As she passed, one of the maids offered a nod but avoided eye contact. Adrian's voice carried faintly from the study. He was on a call, pacing before the floor-to-ceiling window, his tone sharp but calm. "I do not care what the investors think. We will proceed as planned," he said, his words clipped. "The board can complain later." Lena hesitated at the doorway, unsure whether to interrupt. When he noticed her, he gestured for her to wait and ended the call. "Good morning, Mrs. Cole," he said. "You look more awake than I feel." "In the great bar." She smiled faintly. "You sound like someone who never sleeps." He picked up a folder from the desk and handed it to her. "These are the events we must attend together. The first is in 3 days, a charity gala. You will need to memorize a few details about our relationship to make it believable." Lena flipped through the pages. Photos, biographies, press statements, all carefully arranged. "You have prepared everything," she murmured. "I do not leave things to chance," he replied. For a moment, silence stretched between them. She could feel his eyes on her, assessing yet strangely gentle. He seemed about to say something else, but his phone rang again, breaking the moment. "Excuse me," he said quietly. "Duty calls." That afternoon, a professional coach arrived to teach her etiquette: how to walk, how to smile without showing too much emotion, how to respond to press questions. Lena tried her best, though her steps faltered more than once. Adrian watched from the corner, arms crossed. When she tripped over the train of her dress and muttered under her breath, he could not help but chuckle. "You are supposed to glide, not fight the floor," he said. "I am trying," she replied, half embarrassed, half amused. "Trying is good," he said, and for the first time, there was warmth in his voice. By evening, the lessons ended. Exhausted, Lena sat by the window of her room, gazing at the city lights in the distance. The mansion was quiet again. She thought about her mother, recovering in the hospital thanks to Adrian's money, and wondered what the older woman would say if she knew the truth about this marriage. A knock on the door startled her. Adrian stood there holding a small box. "For the gala?" he said, handing it over. Inside was a diamond necklace, simple but breathtaking. "It belonged to my mother," he added softly. "Wear it. She would have liked you." Lena looked up, surprised. "Are you sure?" "Yes," he said. "You should look like yourself, not like someone I built." For the first time since she signed the contract, Lena saw the man behind the title, not the billionaire CEO, but someone who had known loss and loneliness. When he turned to leave, she whispered, "Thank you, Adrian." He stopped, his name on her lips catching him off guard. "Good night, Lena," he said, voice quieter now. As the door closed, Lena touched the necklace in her hands, feeling its weight. It was more than jewelry, it was the first sign that their agreement might already be shifting into something neither of them had planned. The night of the gala arrived with the kind of grandeur that only the wealthy could afford. Cars lined the marble driveway of the Imperial Hotel, camera flashes bursting through the rain like lightning. Inside the ballroom, chandeliers sparkled above a sea of silk gowns and black tuxedos. The air smelled of champagne, ambition, and curiosity. Lena stood near the entrance, her hands hidden in the folds of her gown. The navy dress fit perfectly, the diamond necklace resting against her skin. For a moment she felt like someone else, entirely composed, confident, and untouchable. But her heartbeat betrayed her calm. Adrian appeared beside her, dressed in a classic black suit, every inch the commanding CEO. "Ready?" he asked quietly. She exhaled, steadying her voice. "As ready as I will ever be." He offered his arm. "Then smile, Mrs. Cole. Tonight, we are convincing the world." They entered the ballroom together. Heads turned instantly. Whispers rippled through the crowd, people speculating about the mysterious woman at the billionaire's side. Adrian handled it with ease, his expression neutral yet polite. To him, this was strategy. To her, it felt like walking through a dream she did not belong in. A reporter approached, microphone poised. "Mr. Cole, congratulations on your recent marriage. Was it love at first sight?" Lena froze, but before she could speak, Adrian gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was her moment. She smiled softly, leaning closer to the microphone. "Sometimes love is not planned," she said. "Sometimes it is the best strategy." The crowd laughed lightly, charmed by her answer. Adrian looked at her, something unreadable in his eyes, surprise, maybe admiration. As the evening continued, he introduced her to investors, politicians, and designers. Each handshake, each polite exchange became part of the performance. Yet between those rehearsed smiles, real moments slipped through. A shared glance when their hands brushed, a quiet laugh at a private joke. When the orchestra began a slow waltz, Adrian turned to her. "We should dance, it will keep the press entertained." "I do not dance," Lena whispered. "Neither do I," he said, and led her onto the floor. The music swelled, and for the first time, the crowd disappeared. His hand rested lightly on her waist. Her fingers found his shoulder. They moved cautiously at first, then more easily, falling into rhythm. She could feel his heart through the thin fabric between them, steady, real, and human. "You are doing fine," he murmured. "I am stepping on your shoes," she said. "I noticed," he replied, a hint of laughter in his voice. When the song ended, applause filled the hall. Cameras flashed again, but neither of them looked away from each other. For a second too long, the world seemed to blur around them. Later, when they returned to the limousine, Lena sank into the leather seat, her heart still racing. "You were right," she said quietly. "That was not so bad." Adrian glanced at her, one hand resting on his cufflink. "You surprised me tonight." "How so?" "You made them believe it," he said. Then softer, "You almost made me believe it too." Outside, the city lights streaked past in gold and blue reflections. Inside, silence stretched, comfortable this time, not cold. As the car turned toward Cole Manor, Lena looked out the window and whispered, almost to herself, maybe pretending is not the hardest part. Maybe it is remembering it is not real. Adrian heard her but said nothing. His gaze stayed on her reflection in the glass, the faint curve of her smile and the way it reached her eyes. And though neither of them admitted it, the line between contract and connection had already begun to fade. The days after the gala passed like a blur of headlines and whispers. Photos of Adrian and Lena flooded every business magazine and gossip column. The billionaire's secret bride, one headline read. A Cinderella story or corporate strategy? Asked another. Lena tried not to look, but the images were everywhere, her smile beside his, the way his hand rested lightly on her back, the sparkle in her eyes that looked far too genuine for an arrangement built on paper. At Cole Holdings, the board members appeared more relaxed, the investors reassured. Adrian had achieved what he wanted, stability. Yet inside him, something had shifted, something he could not quite define. One evening, after a long meeting, Adrian found Lena in the garden behind the mansion. She was sitting on the stone steps, barefoot, her heels discarded beside her. The air smelled faintly of rain and jasmine. "You are hiding from your empire again," he said. She looked up at him, half smiling. "And you are checking to see if your investment is safe?" He chuckled quietly. "You make it sound cold." "It was cold," she said softly. At first. Adrian leaned against the railing, watching her. "And now?" Lena hesitated. "Now it feels complicated." The silence between them stretched, filled only by the hum of crickets. Adrian sat beside her, close enough for her to feel his warmth. For once he looked less like a billionaire and more like a man trying to remember what it felt like to be known. "I lost my mother in this garden," he said finally. "She loved to sit here at dusk. I was 17 when she passed. After that, I stopped coming." Lena turned to him, her voice gentle. "She must have been kind. You kept her necklace." Adrian nodded slowly. "She believed that love made people stronger. I believed it made them weak." "You still do?" He looked at her for a long time before answering. "I am starting to wonder." Thunder rumbled faintly in the distance. A soft breeze carried the scent of wet earth. Lena stood, her dress brushing against the stone. "You should not be out here in the rain, Mr. Cole." He rose too, his gaze steady. "You keep calling me that." "It is what the contract says," she whispered. "Then forget the contract," he said, stepping closer. "Just for tonight." The rain began to fall again, light at first, then heavier. Lena laughed, the sound breaking through the quiet like music. Adrian reached out instinctively, his hand finding hers. She did not pull away. They stood there in the downpour. Two people who had built walls around themselves, suddenly letting them crumble. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. "If we keep pretending, we are going to forget it is not real." Adrian's answer came softly, barely above the sound of the rain. "Maybe forgetting is the point." For a moment the world narrowed to the rhythm of the storm and the space between them. His hand brushed her cheek, rain and warmth, blending into something that felt dangerously close to truth. Then, as if waking from a dream, Lena stepped back. "Good night, Adrian," she said quietly, turning toward the mansion. He watched her go, her silhouette framed by the light from the doorway. When she was gone, Adrian stood alone under the rain, his shirt clinging to his skin, the echo of her laughter still in the air. For the first time, he realized the cost of what he had created. A contract could buy silence, security, and stability, but it could never control the heart. Morning sunlight spilled across the vast living room of Cole Manor, glinting off the glass walls and polished stone. The rain from the night before had left the garden shining, the air crisp and new. Lena stood by the window, holding a mug of coffee she barely tasted. Her mind was still replaying the moment in the rain, the warmth of Adrian's hand, the way his voice had softened when he said her name. She told herself it meant nothing. It was just the tension of the arrangement, just proximity, just confusion. Yet every time she closed her eyes, she could still feel the weight of his gaze. When Adrian entered the room, he looked different. No suit jacket, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly disheveled. It was the first time she had seen him like this, almost ordinary. "Good morning," he said, pouring himself a cup of black coffee. "Morning," she replied, trying to sound casual. He studied her for a moment. "You have a free day. No lessons, no appearances. Do something for yourself." "Something for myself?" she repeated. "Like what?" "I do not know." People usually have hobbies. She smiled faintly. I used to paint. Before life got complicated. Adrian leaned against the counter. Then paint. The guest house has a sunroom. It gets the best light. Later she found the space. He mentioned a quiet room with tall windows overlooking the garden. Dust covered the old easel, and a half-finished canvas leaned against the wall forgotten. She cleaned it carefully, found a box of paints, and began to sketch. The movements felt clumsy at first, but slowly her hands remembered. Color began to bloom again, soft blues, muted golds, fragments of the world she had once loved. Adrian watched from the doorway without speaking. For the first time, he saw her not as part of a deal, but as a woman full of quiet strength and grace. When she noticed him, she laughed lightly. Do not stand there like an inspector. You are ruining my focus. He smiled, rare and real. Then I will have to hire myself as your patron. Every artist needs one. Is that what I am now? A project? She teased. No, he said, his voice lower. You are a reminder. Of what? She asked. That there is still beauty in things that are not perfect. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The air between them shifted, heavy with unspoken words. Adrian took a slow step forward but stopped himself. He was not sure whether he was crossing a line or simply acknowledging one that had already disappeared. That night, Lena could not sleep. She walked to the garden again, the moonlight soft on the wet stones. Adrian was there too, as if drawn by the same restless thought. I could not sleep, she said quietly. Neither could I, he admitted. It seems we have that in common. They stood side by side, looking at the faint reflection of the stars in the pond. After a while, Adrian spoke again. When this began, I thought control was strength. I thought keeping my heart locked away made me untouchable. He paused, glancing at her. You have made me question that. Lena's throat tightened. You should not say things like that. Why not? Because it is not part of the contract, she whispered. Adrian's eyes softened. Neither is this, he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. For a moment, she let him. Then she stepped back, shaking her head. Do not make promises you do not intend to keep, Adrian. He said nothing as she turned and walked away, her footsteps fading into the quiet of the hall. When he finally looked back at the pond, the stars had vanished behind clouds. For the first time in years, Adrian Cole felt something he could not control, something real, something terrifying, something that no contract could contain. A week later, the illusion of calm shattered. It began on a bright Monday morning when Lena entered the office at Cole Holdings and felt every pair of eyes following her. Whispers rippled through the hall like static. Something was wrong. By the time she reached Adrian's floor, the tension in the air was unmistakable. Reporters crowded the lobby, flashes bursting through the glass doors. Security guards were struggling to push them back. Lena's phone buzzed with messages she did not understand, links to articles, headlines filled with her name. The billionaire's marriage exposed, contract revealed. Her chest tightened. She pushed through the noise and found Adrian in the boardroom, surrounded by executives. His expression was carved from stone. On the table lay a single printed page, their marriage contract leaked to the press. Adrian, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Who did this? He looked up, his eyes sharp and cold in a way she had not seen in weeks. Vivienne, he said flatly. She got hold of the document. She is using it to challenge my position. Vivienne Grant, the company's vice chair and Adrian's former confidant, had always been waiting for a weakness. Now she had one. Lena could almost hear the headlines forming in her mind. Marriage for power. Fake wife. Real fortune. It have some member d'entente. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Adrian ordered his team to control the narrative, to release a statement. But the damage had already begun. By noon, reporters camped outside the gates of Cole Manor. The press demanded an explanation. Shareholders wanted assurance. That evening, Adrian came home late, his tie loosened, his temper stretched thin. He found Lena waiting in the living room, her face pale but steady. Tell me the truth, she said quietly. Did you know this could happen? No, he answered. But I should have. I underestimated how far Vivienne would go. She took a step closer. They are calling me a fraud, a gold digger. My mother saw it on television. Adrian's jaw clenched. I will handle it. How? She demanded. By sending another press release? By pretending I am not human? His silence was answer enough. I trusted you, she said, her voice breaking. I signed that contract because I believed you would protect my dignity. You promised this would be business, not humiliation. He reached for her, but she stepped back. Do not, she said firmly. I need to think. Lena. No. Her eyes filled, but she held her ground. This was supposed to save me. Now it is destroying everything I have left. The sound of her heels echoed through the hall as she walked away. Adrian watched her disappear down the corridor, every step pulling her further from the life he had built for control and closer to the freedom she deserved. That night, the mansion felt emptier than it ever had. The lights seemed colder, the silence heavier. Adrian sat alone in his study, staring at the framed newspaper on the desk, the same one that had once announced his rise to billionaire status. Now beside it, another headline stared back at him. The marriage that was never real. He closed his eyes, realizing the cruel irony. For the first time in years, he had felt something real, and in trying to protect it with rules and contracts, he had lost it completely. In another part of the city, Lena sat on a bus heading nowhere in particular, watching the streets blur past. Her phone buzzed again, Adrian's name lighting up the screen. She did not answer. She turned it face down and let it ring until the sound faded. Outside, the city lights reflected in the window beside her, fractured and bright, like pieces of a truth she could no longer deny. The line between love and obligation had finally broken, and neither of them knew how to find their way back. 3 days later, Adrian stood behind the podium at the Cole Holdings press conference. Cameras flashed in his face as journalists filled the room, their questions sharp and relentless. Behind him, the company logo glowed on a large screen, the same logo he had spent half his life building. He adjusted the microphone, his expression unreadable. For years, Adrian Cole had been known as the man who never lost control. But this morning, control was the last thing on his mind. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice steady. I know why you are here. The story you have seen is true partly. Yes, my marriage began as a contract, but what you do not know is the truth behind that decision. Murmurs filled the room. Adrian continued, his gaze unwavering. The contract was meant to protect my company. It was never meant to harm anyone. But in the process, I hurt the only person who ever reminded me what integrity truly looks like. I misjudged her. I let others define her worth. Something I should have done from the beginning, he said. Telling you the truth without contracts, without conditions. He handed her a folded newspaper. On the front page was his statement, printed in bold letters. Cole takes full responsibility, defends wife's integrity. I told them everything, Adrian said. You do not owe me anything, Lena. Not forgiveness, not explanations, but I could not let the world keep lying about you. She stared at the paper, then at him. You did that for me? I did it because I finally understood what it means to love someone, he said quietly, and because I could not stand to see you hurt for my mistakes. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The children's laughter echoed faintly in the background, soft and distant. Then Lena put down her brush. You destroyed your own reputation, she said. The board will hate you for this. It is not with second. Adrian smiled faintly. Let them. I spent years building a company. I can rebuild it again. But I will not find another you. Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them away. You should not say things like that unless you mean them. He stepped closer, his voice low and sincere. I mean every word. Lena looked at him for a long time before whispering, You are too late, Adrian. Then let me be late, he said. But let me be honest. Her breath trembled as he took her hand hesitant, waiting for permission. She did not pull away. The children nearby giggled at the sight, but neither of them noticed. The noise of the world seemed to fade, replaced by the quiet rhythm of forgiveness beginning to take shape. For the first time, Lena saw the man she had married, not the billionaire, not the strategist, but the person behind it all. And for the first time, she believed him. 6 months later, spring sunlight poured through the tall windows of the same gallery where Lena once dreamed of showing her art. The walls were now alive with color, her paintings, vibrant and full of quiet strength, framed along every wall. The exhibition banner read, The Art of Lena Hart. Guests drifted through the space, whispering praise, pausing before each piece. At the center of the gallery, Lena stood in a simple ivory dress, her hair swept back, eyes bright with disbelief. She could hardly recognize her own name written across the entrance. The sound of footsteps made her turn. Adrian stood there, dressed in a dark suit, holding a small bouquet of white tulips. The crowd parted instinctively, watching as he approached. "I told you your work deserved this," he said softly. Lena smiled, though her eyes shimmered with emotion. "You did more than tell me. You made it happen. Is res last on a Peterings for yous?" "I only opened the doors," Adrian replied. "You filled the walls." For a moment, they simply stood there, surrounded by her art, the same woman who once worked in his office, now standing on her own stage. The same man who once believed control was strength, now learning that vulnerability could be power too. A hush fell as the lights dimmed slightly, signaling the final speech of the night. Adrian stepped onto the small stage, microphone in hand. His voice carried across the room, calm and genuine. "Ladies and gentlemen, this exhibit is not just about art, it is about redemption. About learning that love, when it is real, does not need contracts to survive. 6 months ago, I nearly lost the person who taught me that truth. Tonight I stand here not as a CEO, but as a man who was given a second chance." He turned to Lena, his expression open, unguarded. "Lena Hart, I have spent my life signing deals and writing rules. But there is only one promise I want to make now, and I do not need ink for it." He reached into his pocket and revealed a ring, simple, elegant, gold warmed by the light. The crowd gasped softly. "Marry me," he said, voice steady. "No clauses, no signatures, just love. Real this time." Lena's breath caught. She felt the world blur around her. The applause, the camera flashes, the rush of her own heartbeat. For a moment she said nothing, only looked at him, at the man who had risked everything for honesty. Then, with a trembling smile, she whispered, "Yes." The room erupted in applause. Adrian slid the ring onto her finger, and for the first time, there was no pretense between them, only truth. Later, as the night quieted and the guests began to leave, Lena and Adrian stood alone in the gallery. The city lights spilled through the glass, reflecting off the paintings. "Do you remember the first rule in our contract?" Lena asked, her tone playful. Adrian chuckled. "No real feelings." She smiled. "I think we broke that one first." He took her hand gently. "Then I am glad we did." Outside, the street was lined with cherry blossoms, petals drifting through the air like tiny pink snowflakes. They stepped out together, the soft wind carrying laughter and promise. Adrian wrapped his arm around her, his voice low. "You were right that night. One night really did change everything." Lena looked up at him, her smile calm and certain. "No," she said. "Love did." And under the city's glowing lights, the billionaire and his once contract bride walked forward. No papers, no rules, only two hearts that had finally found home.